Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. A difficult week in the market. We've been on the road down in Texas, 5 sites in 5 days. However, we wanted to jump on here and recap some of the top news stories from the week. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony absolutely loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let us know in the comments section below how you're feeling about your portfolio and if you're making any moves this week. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, away we go. Friday afternoon. What an event-filled week. We've been down in Texas on the road show here, 5 sites in 5 days. Make sure you guys check these videos out. We put a lot of time and effort into some behind-the-scenes footage, some insight that maybe you won't get on the regular updates or press releases. That being said, we did fall a little bit behind on miner news, so we're going to be going through the recent or top stories from the week. Obviously, a lot of earnings activity as well. We have 7 earnings scheduled for next week. We'll be putting out a schedule over the weekend, so very busy here at Power Mining Analysis. That being said, Anthony, why don't we start with Bitcoin? Maybe get the bad news out of the way first here. Continuing to sell off throughout the week. This has been a fairly dismal week, really, in terms of any investment sector you're in. Bitcoin and the miners having some trouble. Bitcoin now in the 90s.
Yeah, and what you got to remember is, a lot of the OG holders of Bitcoin, hold it for years and years and years. Looks like they started to sell now in that 100,000 range. That's brought a little bit of pressure to the price there. Plus, you've also got the macroeconomic news over the last few weeks as well, which hasn't helped. The government downtime there, and now the decision to get back is it might start to improve. We've breached that 100,000 mark for a couple of days now, so we'll see how long that lasts there. But you're quite right, 7% down over this last week, yeah, it's just one of those days. But we know when we zoom out from Bitcoin, look at it from a long-term perspective, it just looks to be going in one direction, and I'm sure things will pick up in the future. There's a real interest in Bitcoin now, real adoption of it. I believe BlackRock purchased another $600 million of Bitcoin just the other day, so there's no let up from them as an institution buying Bitcoin. Even I managed to buy a little bit of Bitcoin in the sales last night, so I'll continue doing that at these sort of prices. But it's, as I say, we'll monitor it and we'll get back to our normal regime next week.
Most definitely. Now, the Bitcoin miners, we were making some purchases there this week as well. We did manage to film a power play session. We'll be putting that out either tonight or tomorrow, but a great opportunity if you have that long-term conviction. Now, the title of the video is Miner Sell-Off Continues. In pre-market today, we were looking at some double-digit declines, and that's after 3 or 4 days of significant sell-off. Now, the miners have I guess recovered, quote unquote, slightly. We do have a handful in the green, but compared to where these miners were just on Monday, definitely a different landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see, that this last sort of 2 or 3 weeks, when people were making all their money through that period from April. Remember, in April, you could have bought some of these stocks at a fraction of the price they are today, even. That build up there all the way up to sort of like mid-October. And then the last few weeks, it's just been sort of like a bit of a sell-off, really. And we warn people about, having a strategy in place to sell some of your stocks when you've made significant profits, bank a bit of the capital there so that, the road down doesn't impact you as much. And believe you me, the road down these last few days has been a lot quicker than the road up to get there. So, the chances are. But when you look at these stocks now, we're no longer looking at Bitcoin mining stocks, to be honest with you. We're looking at companies that have significant amounts of power and the ability to generate income in more than one strategy with that power, and so potentially give their shareholders a greater return on investment. And so don't underestimate the future of some of these strategies that we've talked about on the podcast and we've talked about on the visits this week. But this is a day. Maybe we're starting a little bit of recovery, but it's too early to say, to be honest with you. Let's see how we get through the weekend and into next week, and we'll be able to start covering a little bit more detail.
Yeah, we like to say time will tell. We'll probably take that route here as well. Now, BitFuFu is first up, you guys. They came out with Q3 earnings. Again, we've got the team on next week, so we're going to save the earnings, the investor presentation for that meeting with Charlie. However, we did want to talk about their production updates. They put out October results. I'll let you get into the numbers here, Anthony. Then we can talk about some of the highlights from operational perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got on the slide here, we've got this month, October 25's production. We've also got the previous month, September's there, just to give you a highlight of the difference there. In terms of Bitcoin mined, we had a reduction in Bitcoin mined 23%. And that's not all down to the difficulty, that's down to the fact that they had a significantly less hash rate there. 36 exahash total hash rate in September and 30.5 exahash in October. Now, not all that is self-mining hash rate. The self-mining hash rate's actually stayed at 5 exahash for over both periods. So that's impacted Bitcoin production. In terms of self-mining, they mined 30 in October over the 31-day month and 33 in September over a 30-day month. There's a 9% difference, and most of that would be applied actually to the difficulty for the month. And I just want to re-emphasize the impact on that difficulty. If you look down the page there to Bitcoin mine per exahash, or even Bitcoin mine per day, you can see the differences now on a daily basis, how much Bitcoin's been mined. But you can also see how much that impacts in terms of potential revenues on a daily basis for the month. Difficulty really is a problem for miners. And, we talk about the halving, which is a straight 50% reduction in your rewards. But the difficulty, which happens every 2 weeks, we've some phenomenal increases in difficulty, which means production is ultimately affected, every fortnight for these mining companies. Now, in terms of operational power, that's obviously another reason. If the hash rate's not as high as well, the power comes down there. So again, down from 624 megawatts to 555. Efficiency, obviously some of the machines that came off were more efficient, so the efficiency is actually increased. The efficiency for BitFuFu is tier one. I mean, we're talking, high end of the game here. There's only a couple of miners with a better efficiency than BitFuFu. So what that helps produce the energy required to mine a Bitcoin is that much less, and therefore that much less in terms of cost, which gives a greater margin. So 18.2, even though it's increased from 17.3, there's only 2 or 3 miners out of all the public miners that can boast a better efficiency than that there. And in terms of Bitcoin sold, they sold slightly more than their production this month, 259 as opposed to the total mine of 253. That obviously helps with their operational and capital requirements. Now, the good thing about BitFuFu is they've got a significant hodl for the size of the company. Bitcoin hodl at 19,053. As I said, that's reduced by 6. It was 1959 in September. And if you look at the value of the hodl as at the end of October 31st, I have to reiterate that because obviously today's price is somewhere like about $12,000 less than that. But as at October 31st, it's $214 million. So a very, very sizable treasury balance for BitFuFu.
That's exactly right. Now, if we move into the operational update here as well, you can see a number of key highlights. Again, we're looking forward to digging into this with leadership in more detail. Anything catch your eye on this list, Anthony?
This is just emphasizing about the power coming down 11%, down to 555 megawatts. Now, cloud mining users, 645,000 registered users as at October the 31st versus 641. There's a slight increase there, but the hosting side of the business obviously has come down there, and we can see that in terms of the hash rate coming off there, nearly 6 exahash coming off. So we'll try to understand that from BitFuFu when we get them on the call next week about the operations there. Is this something that happens on a regular basis, or do they have some long-term contracts with clients? Remember, there are a few miners that have big hosting contracts. We were at site yesterday with Bitdeer. They've got a significant hosting contract. Soluna, obviously, most of their mining model is based around the hosting model, and these companies are able to make a good margin out of hosting. So we'll put that across to BitFuFu when we speak to them next week on the earnings and try and get into more detail as to how these various strategies define their earnings for the last quarter.
Now, next up on the docket here, we have Canaan. We're hoping to host a member of the team here for their inaugural podcast shortly. However, they came out with production results as well. We've got some commentary from management. Then we can get into some of the numbers here in your table.
Yeah, so they've done something like, they've improved hash rate only very slightly, but they managed to maintain the same level of Bitcoin production month over month. So if you look at the October amount of Bitcoin mined, 92 versus 92 in September. Now we know there's an extra day of mining, so there has some impact on difficulty, but not as much difficulty impact as other miners. Their energized hash rate increased by a fraction to 9.31 exahash as opposed to 9.3. But it's the operational hash rate that they were able to sort of like get more use out of those energized miners that were actually there. So that's increased from 7.27 up to 8.25. That's an increase of 13%. Efficiency for Canaan for the whole fleet there, 25.6. That probably puts them sort of like in sort of like the mid tier there. We know there's a lot of miners have, efficiency higher than that, and there are quite a few that have it low, significantly low, like we just seen on the previous miner there. But as Canaan will start adding their own machines in the future, if they're going to use the same strategy as Bitdeer, so if they produce miners and they don't sell them, and potentially they can add them to their own fleet, that efficiency should start to come down because Canaan produce some really good mining machines out there at low efficiency. So maybe we start seeing that. One good thing that they do have is they do have great power cost. 4.2 cents a kilowatt hour puts them in that tier one in terms of power costs there, along with the likes of Riot, IREN, so benefiting from a really good rate of power. Now, from their production, they've sold 64 Bitcoin in the month of October. That helps towards their operational and any capital expenditure. And if you look at the Bitcoin mined per day, 3 as opposed to 3.1, so very, very similar. Just that extra day in October, that's reduced it slightly to 3. In terms of the HODL, again, a sizable HODL for one of these miners here, 1,610 Bitcoin. They also have an Ethereum HODL as well, 3,950. And if you look at the total HODL value that the Treasury has as at October 31st, I must stress that date again because that's the date at the end of the month when these numbers are calculated. That was 191.6 million. And we always like to look at the value of the HODL where we can against the market capitalization as at that date there. And the HODL represented 38% of the total value of the company. So a sizable treasury position there. That gives Canaan the ability to help fund in many different ways some of their strategies going forward. And so we'll be interested when they come on the channel just to hear about some of those strategies. They are sort of like nearly a fully integrated miner. They do produce their own machines. They do have some of their own sites, and they do obviously mine their own Bitcoins. So it'd be interesting to get an understanding of that and how much the strategy of obviously producing these machines is geared to going forward as well as we see the industry from the public mining sector sort of like turn its head towards HPC.
That's great. Yeah, looking forward to hearing about the Avalon family of miners. Maybe we'll even grab ourselves a home miner out of that discussion. Start trying to get those solo blocks. Now, next up is Hive Digital Technologies. Again, earnings has come out. We're working on scheduling in Frank and Iden next week. They're actually down traveling to the Paraguay facility, and really no wonder they are. They just crossed 24 exahash, continuing this aggressive growth we've seen all year and providing a nice little update on their data center operations, specifically here in Canada.
It's been an amazing year for Hive Digital this year. They've started the year round about the 6 exahash, and they've really progressed that. As this update was brought out, they'd already achieved 24 exahash, and we know their target for Thanksgiving coming up in a week or so's time. That's 25. I'm not betting against them to get to that target, nor should anybody else. They've reached every target this year. They'll hit the 25 exahash, and then guess what? They've got another target for next year already in place there. So we'll look forward to catching up with the team in the near future when their earnings call comes out and talking through that target as well. Now, in terms of their production for the month of October, a real sizable amount mined there, 289 Bitcoin mined. That's an 8% increase on the previous month there. That's helped by the fact that their operational hash rate increased to 23.6 versus 21.7. And if you look at the average hash rate, so this is the average hash rate that they use throughout the month, bear in mind when you're installing machines, you don't all install them in the first day. You install them over the period there. That's why a lot of companies put their average operational hash rate. Highs was 21.9, up from 19.4. That's a 13.4% increase. Now, obviously, Bitcoin mine went up 8% over the period. And, that's, again, it's where the difficulty impacts. If you look at the Bitcoin mine per exahash, or Bitcoin mine per day even, 9.3 in October per day, 8.9 in September. That zero point 0.4 of an exahash is around about $40,000 a day. Multiply that by the 30 days in a month, 31 days a month, you're already over 1.2, 1.3 million of lost revenues thanks to the difficulty charge. And this is why thanks to the difficulty change. And this is why we sort of emphasize this. It's a metric that needs to be acknowledged out there. It's hurting the mining companies, and the global hash rate just seems to be increasing, week on week, but not necessarily with all the mining companies in North America. Now, in terms of their efficiency, that also came down. Again, anything in and around that 18 and below is tier one, 17.7. They've reduced it from 18. They're hopefully even further reduce it as they grow their hash rate to 35 next year and bringing in all the latest machines that they're adding to their fleet. That low efficiency is going to make the effort in Paraguay so much easier to mine Bitcoin with a better margin. And remember, they've highlighted that they expect to have really good margins from Paraguay. Having that fleet efficiency only reinforces that because it's using less power to mine a Bitcoin.
That's certainly right. Now, in terms of the Canadian operations here, we've talked a lot about data sovereignty, specifically with Ben Gagnon on the program last night, talking about this Quebec market in Canada, very hard to break into. Hive also in a great position here. They've got the land, they've got the power, and really looking to expand this AI HPC compute up in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, absolutely. They're converting, the 70 megawatt Grand Falls campus, supported by that substation, 80 megawatt substation, into a tier 3 plus AI data center. Now, phase one, which is 20 megawatts of liquid cooled capacity, is to support up to 25,000 next generation NVIDIA GPUs. And this will be used for enterprise AI and machine learning workloads. And so, complementing this initiative, Bush HPC has acquired a 7.2 megawatt Toronto facility, which will also be upgraded to tier 3 plus sovereign AI, ensuring that the Canadian data and compute remain on domestic soil. This is really important there when you look at some of these data centers, making sure that the security of the data is paramount. And so together these projects position Hive as one of the largest green AI infrastructure developers in Canada, aligning national innovation with shareholder value creation. So this two-pronged strategy, grow that hash rate, growing out their HPC strategy. Remember, their target for next year is $100 million of annualized revenue per year by the end of 2026, and having 35 exahash of mining at the same time as well. So delivering significant revenues from both strategies. The future looks bright for Hive.
It certainly does. Yeah, that's one we're watching closely. Now, next up is Bitdeer. They've had a ton of news out this week. So initially, they came out with their Q3 results. They came out with their October operational update. They announced a fire at their Maslin, Ohio facility, which we'll discuss here today. Also, some equity raising, a private placement, a convertible note. So there's a lot to talk with Jeff LaBerge about next week when he comes on the podcast. Now, fortunately, we were at the Bitdeer Rockdale facility yesterday. We got some insight into the Maslin, Ohio fire. Now, luckily, no one was injured. That's obviously first and foremost. The nice thing, though, about this, unfortunate situation, this building was under construction. There weren't actually any miners or PDUs, ASICs in the building. The way they described this to us is they can essentially now pause this phase of development while the insurance companies work to rectify the fire damage or claim and start focusing those ASICs, the PDUs, and the construction on other sections of the development. We've learned throughout the week here these modular designs are essentially a rinse and repeat. So, of course, this is not great for any company. Definitely not a desirable outcome. But considering what could have happened in this situation, definitely not a worst case scenario.
No, absolutely. And the firefighters arrived on the scene and got and extinguished that fire really quickly. Now, you talked about the buildings there. There's 26 buildings being built there. These two obviously now will have to be rebuilt, and obviously the insurance money will cover that. But what they'll do is they'll reconfigure the design now to sort of like make sure that it doesn't hold back any of the other construction there. And by the time the construction gets through for some of those other buildings, of the other 24 buildings, they can then revamp the two at the same time, losing effectively little time or none at all.
Yeah, again, we'll get more detail on that from Jeff. Now, in terms of the operational update, again, they gave a great breakdown of their various different business units, a nice update on the Seal Miner R&D roadmap as well, and of course their operational numbers. So I'll let you walk through these in whatever order you'd like.
Yeah. And also, if you haven't seen the latest video from Bitdeer, that'll be going out soon. Make sure you tune into that there because we were at the actual Rockdale facility yesterday and we saw these seal miners in action. So well worth a watch there. But in terms of their update, they've now had the seal miner 04 chip demonstrated approximately 6 to 7 joules of efficiency at the chip level under low voltage. And this is game changing in terms of, where you think now we talked about the efficiency, anything under that 18, this is a third of that amount there. So, think about how much less power and therefore how much potentially the margins you're going to make, even as the Bitcoin price as it is today. This is a significant result for Bitdeer. This is game changing. Now, this is just really the chips at the moment. So the actual the rigs haven't been produced yet, but they're doing all the testing on the chips, and they work very quickly. Remember, they've already started producing the first 3 iterations. So the Sealminer A3 is already in production and should be arriving in sites very, very near future. In fact, the site there at Rockdale are waiting there. They've got the spaces waiting for these machines to go in there. We saw yesterday how many of the A2 and the A2 Pros they've processed there, a significant amount, and they can do this really quickly. The teams work in tandem together there. They've been there a long time. The last member of the technician staff there arrived over 3 years ago. They've got a really good team. They'll get these machines put in really quickly. In terms of AI, they've achieved the 8 million annualized revenue from their AI cloud. So that's given them a good benchmark now to start having those conversations with clients to prove and have a proven record of delivering HPC at a project scale there, but now being able to increase it on a sort of on a scalable size. So that's really interesting there. They've placed orders with NVIDIA for the next generation GB300s and B300 systems and expect delivery in December 2025. Now, from an infrastructure part, Tidal Norway construction of the 175 megawatt hydro cooling site has now been completed and the expansion has been fully energized. Now, remember, we talk about companies who have significant power. Bitdeer fall into that category. I think they've probably got the most amount of power that is already energized, of which that's 1,611 megawatts, by the way. I think that's the highest of all the miners that's energized at the moment. And they also have developed sites of another 1.4 gigawatts. This isn't pipeline. This is sites they're actually busy working on at the moment, like that site we just mentioned there in Ohio, and many sites all around the world in various continents. So their 3 gigawatts of power is already in development or actually being used. And that puts them pretty much close to the top of the tree in terms of that. Now, moving very briefly onto their operations for the month. Now, remember, Bitdeer have, in terms of mining, have a couple of strategies there. They also have hosting strategy, and it's actually quite significant, 14.2 exahash of hosting. But we focus on the self-mining. That's increased significantly since September, 41.2 exahash. That's up over 6 exahash just in the month there. And in terms of Bitcoin mined, over 500 Bitcoin mined in the month of October, 511, which is a significant increase from the 452. That's a record month for Bitdeer itself. In terms of their HODL, 2,233 Bitcoin held. That's got a valuation of, at the end of October, 244 million versus a value at the end of September of 231 million. So the fact that Bitcoin price did drop between September and October, they were able to increase their HODL to stay ahead in terms of market value of that HODL at the end of October there. And to be honest with you, this is a company that seems to be going under the radar a little bit. They're obviously doing extremely very well in the mining, over 40 exahash. In terms of the hosting, add that onto it, that's 55 exahash. That puts them in that top tier there. And guess what? I think they've got the likelihood of overtaking IREN, CleanSpark, Mara in the very, very near future. With the amount of production that they're coming off the line there at their facilities.
Yeah, pretty incredible to see the scale of this Rockdale facility, and these seal miners really seem to be performing. We not only heard that from Bitdeer, but all of the miners that have had any experience with the seal miner platform speaking very favorably. Also, substantially quieter than the other machines we saw on site. So again, congratulations to the team there, and we'll have more details about the earnings next week. The final one we wanted to talk about, near and dear to our heart, good old Soluna Dorothy. Dorothy 2 in this press release. Actually, we were at the location this week. We said, hey, this looks like it's pretty much complete. They said, yeah, it is. And here's the press release to support it. Now you can see in the image, absolutely phenomenal facility, massive scale, modular units here. We talked about a lot of the details or intricacies in our video or site tour video this week. So make sure you check that one out. But in terms of the press release today, Anthony, again, anything jumping out?
I mean, for me, it's obviously, the fact that now Dorothy 2 is up and running, it gives them now the time to now focus on the next project. They have a pipeline of projects, in the development stage now, and it's just a case of as one goes away, another one can start. We know Project Catty ground has already been broken there and started on that there. This 100 megawatt site here, of which 98 megawatts is dedicated to mining, is absolutely immense. And if you look at you can see the size of the vehicles there, how small they are compared to the site itself. You need vehicles to get around this site. It's 100 megawatts, and we've been around some bigger megawatts sites than this, but it's still the photographs you see there do not do it justice. I wouldn't like to spend all day walking around the site. It might help me actually health-wise to do a little bit more walking around the site there, but it's a big, big site. The other 2 megawatts to get to 100 megawatts, that's going to be focused on driving Project Grace, which again is their in-house HPC project. And again, that's proof of concept. Deliver that project there, conversations then with clients to show that you can deliver it, you can learn from it, and then you're ready to scale up at various other sites. Because a lot of the sites that are on development now, including Catty, which is a 2-phase site, 83 megawatts in each phase, that's 166 megawatts by my calculations there. That's down for either AI or Bitcoin hosting. And we know from this site that they have 4 or 5 very, very large customers. We know that another large customer, Galaxy, are already starting to send their machines and and the actual containers that they're going to be put in. Those containers are already arriving at Catty now to be installed. That can be done fairly quickly. I think by the end of Q1, a lot of Catty will be energized and up and running. So these things can happen really quickly. The other thing that impressed me before we finish is the fact that all these Soluna sites are tied next to wind farms, which means they have the opportunity to be behind the meter as well as having the grid as the backup there. And on a bad month, you're looking at maybe 50% grid, 50% wind farm. And if on a good month, significantly more wind power is used. So really, really great to visit that site. One of the very few sites that has wind, and that's a strategy that they've used on literally all their sites at the moment.
Now, it is the end of the week here. We wanted to quickly address hash price as well. Unfortunately, flirting right at the $40 level. Now, we have Khan on from Luxor next week. We're going to be updating kind of our video format. So not only are we going to be doing all of the October stats and data recap, but we'll also be talking about some of the industry trends Luxor is seeing. They've got a very vast or far-reaching platform of technology here, including the energy platform derivatives. We've talked about those on our podcast. So it's going to be interesting to kind of get a macro view of what they're seeing in the market. In terms of hash price index, not a lot of highlights to talk about here.
No, this is getting quite scary now because the network hash rate is still at that 1100 exahash. What we're not seeing is any machines turning off at the moment, even though the Bitcoin price is dropping down. I mean, the end of the last month at $109,000 a day, or last night it was down in the $95,000 range. That's a significant drop there. And we know that looking at the last set of earnings for some of the big miners, it was a challenge to produce a Bitcoin at a profit. For many of them, if you look at taking into all the costs, and when I say all the costs, I include the buying of those machines. It's a real challenge. And as Ben Gagnon said on the recent podcast, it is a challenge, and that's why a lot of mining companies are now focused on maybe using mining for the next couple of years to bring in cash flows while they're developing another strategy, maybe in the HPC side of it, and then using the HPC that pretty much predictable revenue. At the moment there, you look at that chart and you see the hash price on that chart there. Nobody can tell what it's going to be the next day, never mind in a month's time, whatever like that. That makes everything really difficult to plan. And difficulty, again, 4.6% going up potentially on November the 25th. So again, another 10, 11 days away. But it's giving you an early indication that the blocks now have been calculated in around about 9.5 minutes. It should be 10 minutes. So miners are finding it a little bit easier to find that number. So difficulty will have to be increased to make sure it goes back to 10. The fees themselves, 0.72%, that's not enough for miners to make a meaningful margin in terms of being able to secure the blockchain. And so this is a real telling time for miners. What it means means that there's probably a lot of machines out there that have been able to attract really low or even stranded free power, and probably that's the way forward in the very, very future. We don't think mining is going to stop because we've got another 115 years of mining till the last block's actually mined, but it means the public miners out there, those that are in North America, are going to find it really challenging when they're paying even the likes of 4 cents or slightly under 4 cents. Come the next halving, half the rewards go away, and therefore, that cost price still stays the same. I think the power companies or some of these companies in the Middle East or the Far East, where they can just literally use any of their excess power, put machines there and start mining for themselves, that might be something that happens in the future, which will be a shame because we've been used to having a significant amount of the hash rate in North America. Let's see how that works out the next few years.
You're right about that, yeah, and we expect sovereigns, nation states to get fairly involved with that again in protecting the integrity of the blockchain ecosystem itself. Now, I mentioned at the start, we've had a lot of activity this week, 5 site tours. We've got 7 interviews next week. We understand you guys have lives as well. You maybe can't catch or tune in to each and every one of these podcasts. We are available on 17 audio podcast platforms, including Spotify, Amazon, Apple, all of the favorites. We've also got a news section on our website here, which is essentially a synopsis or summary of the latest, biggest events of the week. You can see some of our recent tours in there. And if you click on the actual video or analysis portion of the website, we've now integrated a point form summary tab for each video. So if you want to get the highlights, maybe you don't have 20-30 minutes to catch the full episode, this is a great opportunity. While you're on the website, make sure you stop by, check out some of the proprietary data, the individual company miner tabs, and of course sign up for our newsletter, which is going out today, once a week, Friday afternoons, 100% free. So with that being said, you guys, a very busy week in the books. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the behind the scenes footage. We certainly enjoyed our trip here. Thanks so much for watching. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.